What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV, back here for another Tottenham update video, day 29. Still no signings in or out, but I tell you what, it's really gone into overdrive today. Rumours going left, right and centre. Romano's non-stop. The rest of them are non-stop. It's literally non-stop Tottenham news for the past 48 hours. And today, Saturday the 29th, has literally gone into overdrive. The first one we're going to talk about is Giovanni Lo Celso. We're going to go through outgoings first, and then we're going to go to incomings. But the first one with Giovanni Lo Celso, Fabrizio Romano saying Lyon and Tottenham have an agreement in place for Giovanni Lo Celso on a loan deal. Not in doubt, as revealed today in the afternoon, which was yesterday, by the way, but it's still not fully agreed from the players' side. Villarreal have also approached Tottenham for a Giovanni Lo Celso loan. That was yesterday, Fabrizio Romano talking. Today, Marco Contario says that Paratici is working in these hours for Diego Carlos, which he is proposing a swap deal with Giovanni Lo Celso to Sevilla, which is quite interesting. I mean, do you think a deal with Gio will happen from now until the end of the window?
Well, it's definitely hotting up. He was also talking to Villarreal, wasn't there, yesterday? So teams definitely seem to be coming in for him after it went a bit quiet with him going to Seville a few days ago. So it looks like he's going to be out the door on a loan deal between now and the end of the season. The structure of the deal remains to be seen. But again, it's going to be disappointing to see him go out the door for me, having never realised his full potential. And this probably spells the end of his career at Tottenham, especially while Conte's here. It seems like he doesn't fancy him, which is a big shame to me. But as long as we replace him with adequate quality, it's not going to be, I'm not going to be, look, at the end of the day, he didn't get on the pitch enough. At the end of the day, he was injured a lot and never really showed his full potential in the Spurs shirt. So if that was to carry on, then yeah, look, as long as we get good quality to replace him, I'm not going to cry over it. It is what it is. In regards to Diego Carlos, Romano's just tweeted just now saying Diego Carlos is considered untouchable by Sevilla and he is guaranteed he won't be leaving before the window closes.
Well,
so
closes the book on that one then.
Looks like Diego Carlos is off the table in that sense, although other reporters are saying we're still in for him. So wait and see how that one plays out. But yeah, Giovanni Lo Celso will be leaving on loan, it looks like, somewhere. We're just not sure where. I'll guess he'd prefer to go to Spain, where he was more successful.
Yeah, I mean, Villarreal not having the greatest of seasons this year as when they were last year. Lyon, I mean, I can see him suiting in well at Lyon, especially from now until the end of the season with the hole that Bruno Guimaraes has left as well. That one just makes sense to me.
Yeah, I'm just saying him personally.
Yeah, personally, yeah, he probably would want to go back to Spain, seeing as he's worked very well in Spain under Real Betis and stuff like that before. But you know, he's been in France before with PSG, albeit it didn't work out that well for him. But yeah, his best football has come in Spain, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. That's a Real Betis, so he's probably best thought of in Spain.
But let's move on. Let's talk about Tanguy Ndombele again. Julian Maynard saying that Tanguy Ndombele will not join PSG. The deal is off. And RMC Sport following on from that saying Ndombele will now open the door to other clubs as PSG is off, and that is his priority move, and that is completely off apparently. Everton, Leverkusen and Valencia are all in the clubs within the running for Tanguy Ndombele. Do you see him wanting to go to any of these clubs?
I reckon he'll want to go rather than stay at Spurs. I think obviously PSG has his heart set there, but if it's not going to happen, then I'm pretty sure he'd rather a 6-month loan deal somewhere else than to stay at Tottenham and waste away for 6 months. So Leverkusen's quite an interesting one because they're quite an attacking team, so he might fare well there. So it'll be interesting to see. But again, that's big money for a team like Leverkusen to spend in the Bundesliga if they're going to spend on his wages, although reportedly it's not as much as we think. Everton, we know, have rich owners, although their FFP is not great. But whether they're looking for some late deals to improve their squad to save them from relegation, and Ndombele might be one, although he might not be up for a relegation fight. He could add some qualities to midfield to let them win games against lesser teams. You know, they did just lose to Norwich, so you know, it's players like Ndombele could help with those kind of situations. So wouldn't be surprised if they try, but I think he wouldn't want to go there. I reckon he'd probably rather move abroad if I was to hazard a guess.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the Spanish league, I think, would really suit him. I think, you know, it's a lot slower than it is in England. Not that saying that a slower game will suit him, but he's going to get more time on the ball, and that's what he likes, Tanguy. He likes time on the ball. Yeah, again, he does like working in those tight little spaces as well, but I think he can really thrive in the Spanish league. I really do. I think it suited him.
Yeah, I agree.
But let's move on. Let's talk about Bryan Gil now, because this is an interesting one from Fabrizio Romano. He says, Bryan Gil to Valencia. He is the closest Tottenham player to leaving the club as it stands. Only a matter of details now, and then the deal could be completed. So he is kind of saying that Bryan Gil has one foot out the door at the moment. It is a loan deal that they're talking about till the end of the season. I don't imagine there'll be an option to buy at the end of that, but I think it will be good for him. I mean, if he was going to go on a loan, I think I'd prefer him to stay in England to get to grips with the English football, but is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, it's a weird one, Bryan Gil. As much as I like his potential and stuff like that, and I definitely think he needs a loan deal, we did spend a lot of money on him. You know, the money we spent on him does imply he would have been a big part of the first team this season. So I don't know whether we're disappointed as a club that he's not quite ready yet, or whatever it is. It is disappointing. He looks to be going to be shipped out on loan 6 months after. Remember, 22 million plus Lamela wasn't it, for the deal for Gil? And you know, considering we were struggling to pay 20 million for Adama, that suggests that when we do spend that kind of money, it's for a player we're convinced is going to impact the first team, at least in the short term. And the fact that Gil was going to go out on loan after 6 months is a bit disappointing from my point of view. But I still think he's got quality, and I still want to obviously keep him around. And I wouldn't want to sell him just because he hasn't worked out at such a young age after 6 months, but it is a bit disappointing. So yeah, look, Valencia will probably be a good move for him. It's a bit, again, it's a league he already knows, and the whole point is he needs to adapt to this league. So I hope it's not a waste of time, but I think the game time will in general help him anyway. So at least if he's getting a loan deal in Spain, it'll probably just be positive for his development in general, but just won't accelerate it as much as if it was in England.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Bryan Gil, in terms of being disappointed, I mean, I don't really feel that way in terms of disappointment for Bryan Gil. When he came in, I know he came in replacement for Eric Lamela, but I think the feeling was always that he's going to need time to bed in. He's a young player coming through. He's nowhere near the finished article yet. So I think it's kind of panned out pretty much how I expected, really, with Bryan Gil. Do you not agree?
Really, you expected him to be out on loan in 6 months' time after signing?
Maybe not out on loan, but I didn't
million?
expect him to get many minutes.
No, but we signed him for 22 million plus Lamela. And the way we spend money as a club, you wouldn't expect us to spend money on a player like that unless we think he's going to impact the first team in the short term.
You say that 10 million for Jack Clark, 25 million, whatever it was for Ryan Sessegnon. You know, we spend this kind of money on these up and coming talents. That's what we do.
Sessegnon, again, a player we thought he was played for Premier League Fulham on a regular basis. So I definitely thought when we signed Sessegnon, he was going to be in the first team. Like, especially whether on the bench or not in the squad. Yeah, Clark, fair enough. That's one. But you could argue we spent like 35 million on Gil in a way.
Yeah.
22 plus Lamela. So that kind of money is not a player I expect to be seeing as the least the amount of minutes he has. So I think from that point, it's a bit of a disappointment. But I'm not saying I'm ready to cut my losses yet or anything like that.
Yeah. All right. That's Bryan Gil. Let's move on to Joe Rodon, as the Daily Mail is saying that Brighton are interested in taking Joe Rodon on loan from Tottenham should they sell Dan Burn to Newcastle, which I'm not sure if it's one that's hotting up today, but I did hear some rumors about that yesterday. So I don't know how that's progressed, but
last few days it's been hotting up. Yeah,
last few days, but I'm not sure what the situation is with that now, but Brighton are interested in taking Joe Rodon, and I think it'll be a good move for him if that happens.
Yeah, playing under a manager he used to play at Swansea, definitely the kind of football as well they play with will definitely help with his ball playing ability. Bring the ball out from the back and defending that way. They've got quite a good defensive record as well, Brighton. So if he gets regular game time there, for sure, it'll be a very good loan move. But if they are replacing Dan Burn with him, I would assume they'll want an option to buy in there at least. I would assume. Why would they just want to help Tottenham for 6 months? It doesn't really make sense unless it's just a short term while they get a replacement in the summer. But I would assume if they're getting a deal in, they'll probably want an option to buy. So from that point of view, maybe get some money for him. If we're not convinced, I don't know. But I think if he is just there on a 6 month loan, it's great for us. Yeah.
Yeah. But even 6-month loan, whether there is an option or not, I can't see him staying at Spurs. I really can't. I mean, no manager seems to fancy him, not getting any sort of minutes as well, even when Tanganga's making these terrible mistakes and stuff like that. So for me, I think the writing's on the wall a bit for Joe Rodon at Spurs.
Fair enough. Yeah, it looks like that at the moment.
But let's move on. The last of the outgoings, and Steven Bergwijn has popped up again with the Telegraph out in Holland saying that Erik ten Hag believes bringing in Steven Bergwijn would guarantee Ajax the league title and is pushing for it. Daniel Levy and Mark Overmars are still in direct contact and slowly getting closer to a deal, but time is short. Interesting. Still looking to get Bergwijn out the door potentially.
Yeah, I'm guessing that it's a case of, let's say, Ndombele, and maybe if Ndombele and Dele are still here, maybe it's one that we need to get out the door to get incomings, isn't it? So maybe he's earmarked
So
as
get
all
two
right.
players out the door that he doesn't rely on. I mean, keep 2 players that he doesn't rely on and get one that he does rely on out the door.
I mean, that's
Tottenham.
that's what it seems to me. I don't think we want to sell him as our first choice, but again, teams aren't coming in for our players, are they? We're struggling to get rid of Ndombele and Dele. So if we can get rid of Bergwijn and then bring in another one, maybe that's how they're seeing it. I think it would be a massive mistake. I think we should be keeping Bergwijn right now. He's a player who obviously in the last game against Leicester was brilliant, and hopefully that can be a turning point for him. And to sell him straight away when we're short of numbers, even if we are going to bring one in, I think would be a big mistake. So I wouldn't want to see that one go through right now, especially as we got other priorities. But I'm just thinking how Levy's probably thinking. He's probably thinking, if we can't get rid of Ndombele and Dele, we need to get someone out to bring someone in. And if that person's Bergwijn, is at the end of the world. And he's probably thinking it's probably not the end of the world. So that's probably how he thinks.
The way I think about it is that Conte's named him as our Harry Kane backup. If he goes and we don't bring in a striker, then we're leaving ourselves even shorter once again.
Yeah, correct. We're not going to bring in a striker. So I wouldn't want to get rid of him. I think it would be a big mistake. And I think I'd be very angry if we got rid of him, especially at this stage. But I wouldn't put it past this board.
All right, let's talk about some incomings now. And we've got a new name for you guys, Douglas Luiz of Aston Villa. The Daily Mail says Tottenham are preparing a 32 million bid for the Aston Villa midfielder. Romano saying Douglas Luiz is one player on Tottenham's list that they are considering. What do you make out of Douglas Luiz, first and foremost?
I don't think he's a bad player. I think he's quite good on the ball in terms of his. He's got really quite good technical ability. He moves quite nicely in midfield. He's got a fairly decent long shot, although he doesn't score too many goals. But the goals he does score, he's scored some bangers in his time in the Premier League so far, and he's got a fairly decent passing range. But for a defensive midfielder, I don't think he's like top notch. I don't think he's like the best we can get or anything like that. You'd be an average, like you'd be a decent signing. I think technically you can maybe argue on the ball he's a bit better than the likes of Skip and Højbjerg. Off the ball, I still have my doubts a bit, but I don't know. I mean, we're not linked with great centre mids at the moment, are we? So it's not like I'm saying he's a much better or much worse than those ones we're linked with. But at least he has Premier League experience. He's played for Villa quite. He's been quite good for Villa, but he's not been like, John McGinn's been far better than him. He's not better than him. And and especially now Villa, if they were keen to let him go before the deadline, that would tell me that they're not bothered about letting him go.
Yeah, as well. And, they're being linked to bring in the next player we're going to talk about as well, who I think, in my personal opinion, I would prefer if it was a choice between the two. And that's Rodrigo Bentancur of Juventus. Dimarzio saying in the last few hours, Tottenham have upped their bid for Bentancur. Tottenham's offer is 30 million euros plus bonuses. Romeo Agresti says that Aston Villa have withdrawn from the race to sign Bentancur. No new offer for the player. Now Spurs are in pole position for the Uruguayan. And Sky Sports say that Tottenham are looking to complete a double deal for Rodrigo Bentancur and Dejan Kulusevski before the window closes. I mean, when you compare the two players, who would you prefer?
Yeah, I think I want Bentancur. I think his level of consistency is a bit high, although you could argue Douglas Luiz is slightly better on the ball. I think Bentancur offers a bit more of an all-round midfield game, especially he's younger. He's a pretty good player, more scope to improve, and under contact can definitely see him improving massively. So, yeah, I think I'd want Bentancur, and I don't know if he'd be cheaper or not, But I think if we can get a double deal for him and Kulusevski, then all of a sudden this window isn't looking as bad as it was today, basically.
But
a few
they're
days
talking
ago,
about
everyone
similar
thinking like,
figures though. They're talking about similar figures around like the 30 million ballpark figure mark.
yeah, and I'd much rather spend that on Bentancur than Louise for me. I think anyway. I think it's a better deal for us if we can get him in. And it says a lot that they're going for Villa. Well, we're going for Bentancur, weren't they? And we're happy to get rid of Louise, but maybe they couldn't get rid of him. That's why they're stopping with Bentancur. So I'd rather we go for him. I think that could be a good deal for us.
Agreed. Let's move on to Dejan Kulusevski now. Romano saying Kulusevski is keen to move to Tottenham, and Tottenham are working on a deal right now as we speak. Conversations are progressing. Juventus are working to complete Dennis Zakaria deal while they're still in talks with Tottenham to find a solution for Kulusevski. Juve asked for mandatory buy clause included, and the player is keen to move to Tottenham. Glongari, actually very soon, just before we started recording, says that Tottenham are still pushing for both Kulusevski and Bentancur and want to sign both players. I mean, when you're looking at attacking players coming into Tottenham, he's the only one that's really being spoken about at the moment. So even if we don't like him, I think we've got to bring him in.
Yeah, but I think he's decent again.
Yeah, I like him.
A lot of people are shitting on it. I'm not really sure what. Maybe look, I know he hasn't had a great year so far at Juve, and maybe that's part of the reason, and maybe he's been inconsistent. But I think he's got quality. I really do, and I think he's at a young age as well. Adds fresh blood into the team, and it might take him a bit to really become the proper player he is. But I still think he can come into the first team and make a bit of an impact now, even though he might not be the best he can be. I still think he'd definitely be a good option for what we compared to what we have right now. So I'd be excited about him coming in, especially his versatility and his quality. But I would call for a bit of patience in terms of him hitting his prime and being the best he can be. But I definitely think he'd be a good transfer for us.
I completely agree. I think he's a player that last season really impressed me. Obviously, he hasn't kicked on this season, but I think he showed the Serie A, what a good player he has been over the past couple of years since joining Juventus, at Parma as well. This season it hasn't happened for him under Allegri. They've changed their system a little bit and changed the way they play. So I think Kulusevski would be a really good signing for us. Obviously, he's not on the levels of that player that went to Liverpool instead of us. Not even going to mention his name anymore. But I think that Kulusevski would be a good signing for us. I really do. But let's move on to the last bit of news of the update, and that is Alvaro Morata, with Fabrizio Romano confirming Tottenham wanted Morata on loan, but Atletico only wanted to get rid on a permanent deal and not looking to loan him out. So that one pretty much ends that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I wouldn't want him on permanent. I would definitely want him on a loan, even if it's a loan with an option to buy and we can see how he does for 6 months. I wouldn't mind that, but I wouldn't want to spend money on him right now on a permanent deal. That doesn't make sense to me, especially because his wages are probably quite big. And they're probably a decent, he's gone for quite big transfer fees in the past, hasn't he? So you're looking at least probably 20, 30 million, aren't you, for him? I wouldn't want to pay a permanent right now for him.
All right, so that's the end of the update. Still day 29, nearly the end of day 29. Still no signings. Are you feeling a bit more better about it now, seeing as all these links, or are you still just very, don't believe a word anything?
No, I'm still not happy about how things have gone, especially how we've conducted ourselves with the deals we have gone in for. It's been the same mistakes as it's been every single time in the transfer window. I am hopeful we're going to get at least one in. But again, by the looks of things, seems like a lot of moving parts still to happen, isn't there?
Yeah.
And where, I can very easily see a situation where some things we are hoping to happen don't happen, and then other deals fall through and we're left with nothing. I mean, that could easily happen. And that's the risk you take by leaving things till so late. So that's what I'm not happy about. But if we do get Bentancur and Kulusevski in before the end of the window, I'll put it down as not a disaster, for sure. I'll put it down as a decent window.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, Kulusevski and Bentancur, for me, is a really good window. I think two positions that we need, centre mid and the attacking positions. Kulusevski's got that bit of creativeness in him as well, which adds that to our squad. So
the only worry is no right wing back being linked to it at all right now.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that
at all. So are we just giving up?
It seems so. That's what it seems like.
Ah.
But look, it is what it is. But the one thing I'm going to say before we end the show is that snippet that came out about that from Glenn Hoddle talking about Daniel Levy.
Yeah.
Basically, you read that and you're like, did he say this today, or did he say this 10 years ago or 15, whenever it was? It seems
20.
as though it's so current. It's mad,
Yeah,
isn't
he
it?
said, yeah, if you can read, if I'm reading, I've got it up here. He says, I kept running down dead ends when it came to signings. It often seemed that I wasn't on the same page as the board. I found it very strange. I never had a single conversation with the owner, Joe Lewis, and I wasn't the last Tottenham manager to discover that transfer talks tended to drag on when the chairman, Daniel Levy, was involved. I got on with Daniel, who had been given responsibility for running the football operations by Joe Lewis, but there was always something to negotiate over with Daniel. It wasn't easy to accept, and I felt cut off at times. There was no link to the very top of the club. There where the owner's silence was deafening, and I struggled to build a rapport with David Pleat, who obviously is no longer at Tottenham. There was a wall between us, and we drifted further apart instead of trying to find some common ground. Ultimately, everything felt too political. It wasn't that I had unwanted signings foisted on me from above. The problem was more that we dithered when we needed to be decisive, and that stopped us. And he says that stopped us from progressing. And is that not exactly what is happening now and what's happened for the last 20 years? It's pretty much word for word what every Tottenham fan has complained about. And that's Glenn Hoddle, our Tottenham manager, saying it 20 years ago from his autobiography. He said how Tottenham was run back then. And literally...
That was Enoch's first manager.
Exactly. So, you know, people say, why are people going on at Levy now? Oh, Paratici's now involved. How can you blame Levy? It's like, I understand what you're saying. Like, you've brought in Paratici, Levy's taken a step back. But when you're seeing the same thing happen again and again, and then we make change, and then the same thing happens again, how can I not think that it's the guy before who it happened with? Why would I think things have changed when there's no evidence of change? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Spot on. It's the same thing. Anyone, whoever comes in, whoever he hires, whatever manager he hires, whatever sporting director he hires, it's all the same every time, isn't it? And Frank Arneson as well, some old quotes of him has resurfaced today. I don't know if you saw them, but he's talking about that Daniel Levy won't get in the way of, if a manager doesn't want a player, he won't bring in that player. That's fair enough, but he just has no clue about football, is what he was saying.
The biggest quote from Hoddle there when he said we dithered when we had to be decisive, and that is just... Is that not textbook Daniel Levy? And is that not exactly what we've seen in this window? For me,
how can you be making the same mistakes for 20 years? How?
For me, it's the same. It's exactly the same. That's the big number one complaint most of us have had. And I mean, if there's no more evidence in this window, I don't know what else is.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. But that is our Tottenham updates today. We'll be back tomorrow, back in the studio as and when anything drops. But thank you everyone for watching today. Like, subscribe and comment. And as always, come on you Spurs.